Hello everyone. So yesterday we said that there is no source in the classical sources about music at all regarding Sefira. And of course I got what I believe was expected responses of people that said, what do you mean, Rabbi? All the people don't listen to music, there's no source? And the answer is there's a quasi source. On the seif that we quoted yesterday in the Code of Jewish Law saying you can't get married, the Shulchan Aruch says, Aval, le'ares v'le'kadesh shapir dami. But you could give a ring and say, Hareat mekudeshet li, which usually happened a year before what we call the chuppah. That you can do, but you can't have the wedding with the party with the chuppah and all that. Based on those words, the Magen Avraham says words that everyone says this is the source for music, even though once again, he's not talking about music. And I'll tell you exactly his words, and I will translate word for word. That he says, Venirali, and it seems to me, you can actually have a meal after you give the ring and say Hareat mekudeshet li, but to actually have dancing is absolutely forbidden, because that is the minhag during Sefira, not to have dancing. Venirali, shaf misha shiduchim. And what we call an engagement party without the giving of the ring, if someone does that, even there you shouldn't be dancing. So the Magen Avraham doesn't talk about music, he talks about dancing. And indeed, that's ultimately the only source that we have in our sources regarding this particular part of what we would call singing, dancing, and whatnot. In other words, there's nothing about musical instruments, there's only something about dancing. The Orchot Chaim, I'm not talking about the Orchot Chaim of Aharon Milunil, who's one of the Rishonim, but this is a Rav from Spinka by the name of Rav Nachman Kahana, brings, based on this Magen Avraham, something from a Rav called a Da'ak, Daled Ayin Kuf Rashi Tevot, that if you make a wedding on Lag BaOmer, you better finish by the end of Lag BaOmer, because their Ashkenazic minhag was continued mourning practices out after Lag BaOmer, with the exception of Lag BaOmer. And then he says, if the party goes into the night, Shelo Lasot Rikudim Vechle Zemer Belel Yodalet. So he already adds in not only singing and dancing, but also musical instruments. And indeed, when the Mishnah Berurah brings this law, he basically quotes verbatim what the Magen Avraham says, and he says, Lasot Rikudim Umecholot Nahaguli Isur. You're not allowed to have, the Mishnah Berurah says, you're not allowed to have dancing only. And stam dancing is prohibited. So, as you could see, there is no source for musical instruments. However, there are those that inferred from the words of the Magen Avraham that yes, there is an actual prohibition of musical instruments, because how are you supposed to have dancing without musical instruments? It's like a package deal. And then they add, well, if you have musical instruments, you can't even hear the music later. So as you could see, we are 3 times removed. 1, the classical source is only talking about haircuts, and they talk about weddings. 2, the Magen Avraham, 17th century, adds in dancing. And number 3, from dancing we get to musical instruments that usually come with the dancing, that ultimately some have said, that's included in the Isser of dancing, even though, not the Magen Avraham in the 17th century, and not the Mishnah Berurah in the 20th century even mentioned it. So, God willing, tomorrow we will see what the poskim of our generation say about this prohibition of actual music, which again is not written in the Magen Avraham, not written in the Mishnah Berurah, who only talk about dancing.
הנני מוכן ומזומן כמו שכתוב בתורה הנני מוכן ומזומן הנני מוכן ומזומן הנני מוכן ומזומן הנני מוכן ומזומן לכאן